it's an escape from a world that's too ugly and we can't control. So it's being able to create a world for yourself. And this album, I think, will make people know me more, but I don't think they'll ever understand me. And it's an album about relationships. It's about things that I've experienced. And I think it's more direct in some ways, but it's very chaotic and dada in other ways. So some people might not understand it at all in the way that I intended it, but that's kind of the beauty of anything that you make, that it's something for everybody to take away from. Any art isn't complete until someone experiences it. America needs someone like me to say what I say and to make sure that democracy is functioning properly. If we're going to fight wars and represent democracy and freedom of speech, then I have to open my big mouth and make sure that everyone's listening. I think church has very little to do with spirituality. I think it's something you have to find in yourself. It's about expressing your deepest fears and your emotions and putting it in something. It's not about living in fear and praying and hoping you're not going to go to hell. That's not very spiritual to me. Usually people hate what they're afraid of. It's the classic story. I think that even kind of goes back to Jesus, you know. They were afraid and didn't understand him, so they killed him. And I think the same thing kind of exists in music. You know, maybe I should just become a Christian and make them all happy. But I think if I found Jesus, which I didn't know he was lost in the first place, if I did, I don't think he would probably be that much different than me, you know. He's a long-haired guy that likes to, you know, dress sexy. A lot of chicks wear it. The way music can be approached differently, the fact that you can be counterculture and pop culture at the same time. I think that I make people think differently about beauty and looks, and that you can take something that would normally be unacceptable or unattractive and make it interesting.
Yeah.
I try and really invert anything that's a standard.
It must be very difficult for you to really be misrepresented in a way, because your actual agenda is so off the channel anyway. That is there anything that you consider to still be obscene in art that you've yet to?
Well, I set out from the beginning to establish myself as someone who is the worst, and there's nothing that you could say about me that could damage me in any way. So that way, I only had up to go. So that made it easier for me as an artist, as a person.
Yeah. Is there anything though that you would rule out? How far would you go?
Absolutely, it's never my desire just to go far for the sake of it. I think I'll do things if they have a purpose, if it helps express what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And with anything, you can go farther than anyone if you do it the right way. But if you do it for the wrong reasons or without any sort of artistic element to it, then it comes off as shocking or silly or base. But that's kind of what sets things apart from being relevant and just being shocking.
Yeah. Are you happy with having an image of sort of the self-styled Satan of rock?
Well, the fact that people say what I basically tell them in a sense to say when it comes to the media, I might as well be writing their stories for them, because it's very simple the way it operates, and I know as being a journalist, that's the image that I've wanted to portray, because even the word Satan itself just represents rebellion. So I just like to do what I expect the least and what others expect the least. I still like to try and surprise myself sometimes.
Did you have you read the Bible, and did you go to church when you were a kid or anything?
I've read the Bible many times. I probably know more about it than most Christians do. And I think there's a lot of really important things to be drawn from it, and different things than most Christians, particularly in America, take from it. It's used more as a tool of fear and exploitation than it is trying to gain any real knowledge from.
The simple fact that you have such a huge audience and a number of people that are interested in your music must suggest that you're doing something that, no matter how, in a way, perverse, is saying something to people. I mean, you are reaching out to people that feel as though they've been let down, isolated, all the rest of it.
I think it's rather traditional part of rock and roll. I think that's what any rock star's job, in a sense, is supposed to be. You know. I don't consider myself the first in any way. I think for me it was people like Jim Morrison. I think was the very first thing that I ever read about that really got me interested in that type of an idea.
Okay. How did Brian Warner, as was, develop into Marilyn Manson?
I think Marilyn Manson, just as a name and by discovering it and defining it, enabled me to fulfill my dreams and say and do the things that before that I was too afraid to do. I didn't have that belief in myself. So I don't ever think I changed as much as I evolved. Maybe it was more of a cocoon or something.
What sort of stage of your life did you actually decide that was going to happen? How old were you when it actually manifested itself completely?
I think when I started the band, it just kind of struck me instantly. I must have had some sort of calling from God.
You were working.
I'm not sure where it came from.
You were working in Miami, I believe, as a music writer.
That's right.
So you must you've obviously got a lot of knowledge of the mechanics of these things and a good perception of all of that. Do you find that the baggage that's associated with Marilyn Manson actually gets in the way of the message?
No, because the baggage is part of the message. And the worst part of the baggage is going through customs.
How natural does it feel the way you are perceived, and is it sort of a mask that you actually remove at certain times, or is it always there for you?
I don't ever remove my personality. I don't wake up and go to bed dressed as I do when I'm in public, but neither does anyone else. But I don't consider myself to be playing a role or to be wearing a costume or a mask or anything like that. I just enjoy expressing myself through the way I look, and my personality is always the same.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's and there's not one easy level to my personality. Most people will probably think that I'm schizophrenic because I behave quite differently in each situation. But that's only because I'm not afraid to. I think everybody has that in them, but most people think that that's a bad thing, but I don't.
How do your family feel about the way you are now?
They're very supportive. My mother, I think, was always such an Elvis fan that this for her is her way of having her own Elvis. And my father likes to sometimes come on the road because he's a dirty old man and he likes to try and pick up young girls.
Do you think Brian Warner may actually one day kill off Marilyn Manson as Bowie did with Ziggy Stardust?
No, I think unfortunately Marilyn Manson killed Brian Warner, so there's There's no coming back on that.
No going back. Do you feel an affinity with Bowie or any other characters such as him who've used performance? So
I think he was, you know, one of the best at doing at becoming a chameleon. I think Madonna was also quite good at that, and Prince even to a certain extent.
Musically speaking, which of those or which influences have been particularly important for Marilyn Manson?
All of them in different ways. You know, sometimes musical influences will be more literal, and sometimes they'll be more about the spirit. You know, on this record, the influences of Lennon, I think, aren't musically obvious, but of some of what he had to say is there. Other times, the influences of like the Sex Pistols or the Stooges is musically obvious. So they all manifest in different ways.
What scares you, if anything?
It's hard for me to find things to be afraid of. Generally, just not being able to do what I want. You know, that would be the worst fear.
What do you dream about?
It depends, you know. Sometimes sex with teenage girls, other times the end of the world, other times, you know, strange, you know, it's hard. That would be hard to answer. I usually try and put my dreams into my songs.
Right.
But, I haven't dreamt a lot lately. I think that maybe my mind's been so occupied that I haven't had time to rest it when I go to sleep. But I think now that I've unloaded this record, that I'll be able to dream again. I haven't had too many dreams lately.
You mentioned John Lennon just a couple of minutes ago, and there's a cover of Working Class Hero on the new single, I believe. What does Lennon actually mean to you?
Well, he plays into some of the icons that represent revolution to me, and he also plays into my obsession with parallels and coincidences throughout history. As I mentioned before, him writing "Happiness is a Warm Gun," and how that, you know, relates to his death. Him writing "Helter Skelter," and being killed in front of the Dakota, which is where Rosemary's Baby was filmed. Norman Polanski's wife, of course, was murdered by the Manson family.
Right,
so all these strange obsessions, he became weaved into that for me. But that song in particular has always been one of my favorite songs of all time.
Which song?
Working Class Hero.
So you're quite interested in this well, it seems as though there are some sort of connections between the White Album, the Tate murders, and the Hollywood Columbine thing. Do you feel that?
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of and you know, it all begins to tie in together with Death Valley and Trinity, where the first atom bomb was detonated, and Adam and Eve, and you know, on the record I often mention Jack or John, and sometimes I'm referring to John the Baptist, John Lennon, JFK, my grandfather. A lot of Jacks that come up. So there's a lot of levels to be explored on the record, and I think it'd be much more enjoyable sometimes for the listener when they explore them on their own. So I don't like to delve into them too much, but I think people can assume and believe that my obsessions run pretty deep on this one, so there's a lot to be taken from it.
What about this quote I read that you claimed that John Lennon had sort of brought his own death upon himself with his communist sentiments?
Well, I think
I didn't mean that in a negative way, that he deserved it.
No.
What I believe I was referring to was that he became a danger to the American government, and I wouldn't be surprised if they were responsible. I can't say that for sure, obviously, but I think anyone, and this is how I found him relating to Kennedy and Christ, is that they were all had very dangerous opinions, as do I, and their lives all ended because of their opinions, as far as I can see it. So it's a matter of me acknowledging that, knowing that, and trying to not let my idealism, lead me to my own destruction.
Does that not make you a threat then?
It does.
Well, I'm the threat as well.
It does, but I guess that's part of the trade-off that you have to you have to give up when you want to say something.
Do you get a lot of hate mail or abuse?
I don't ever really come across it, but death threats have become quite common when we're on tour. So.
Yeah. Do you think Mark Chapman should have been released when his parole was due a few weeks ago?
No. I think if people have to be responsible for their actions, and he was given a sentence, and he should have to fulfill it.
Do you think he should ever be released?
No, I think when you take someone's life, even if it's as simple as an eye for an eye, I think that you should be punished in the same way.
Yeah.
I think Manson, strangely, is a political prisoner because the fact that he's in jail for the crime of telling other people to kill someone in this day and age wouldn't have happened, but because the 60s was such a time of confusion and there was a need to distract the world from the Vietnam War, and there was a need for a scapegoat for the hippie generation. It's very strange that Nixon declared him guilty during the trial. If that would have happened in this day and age, it would have been thrown out. It's kind of sad to see someone like O.J. Simpson free and someone like Manson not. And not to say that Manson wasn't a dangerous person, and the girls and the guy that were actually involved in the murder, very much deserved to be in prison. But I think Manson's sentence was a little excessive for the actual crime he was convicted of.
Yeah. In
fairness, just on a purely objective level, because obviously I don't condone the Manson murders, but I think it's a strange thing about scapegoating, and that's why I found drawn to it in such a way, because I always get approached by people to donate or perform for things like Amnesty International and things like that, and I don't, because I feel like when in America there's problems to be addressed, it's not my job to be fighting for other people's problems as well.
Is Manson's time actually up? I mean, he's been inside for what?
He'll never be released.
Yeah.
But and I don't think he really should, and I don't think he wants to be. I think he belongs in prison because it's where he grew up, But sometimes it's kind of disappointing that the simple request of wanting a guitar they won't give him.
Did you ever spoken to him?
No, I don't have a desire to, because I think it's just something that doesn't interest me. But just as a cultural phenomenon, I think it's a very important part of American culture to understand how someone like him relates to someone like Marilyn Monroe, and that's obviously the source of why I created the band, and so much that I wanted to say about American culture.
Are you familiar with the story about Marilyn Manson and Dennis Wilson?
You mean Charles Manson, Dennis Wilson?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Yes.
Have you heard Cease to Exist?
Yes.
It's a great song. It's just such a bizarre story. He had him living in his house for, you know, these orgies going on, and Brian Wilson at the same time was going completely out of his mind.
Yes. Yes, you know, well, it's, like I said, you know, certain people, you know, end up being the scapegoat, you know, when, you know, there's always more to the story than the world wants you to know.